Well, you probably already saw my video about the top 5 worst WrestleManias. Let's do something a little bit more positive. This will be a list comprising my top 5 favorite WrestleMania events to date. I will state everything that I loved about these shows, why they're my favorites, and generally give you something a little bit more happy and peppy rather than my usual snarky, sarcastic asshole self. Like the previous list, this will be listed chronologically rather than actually ranked because doing so would drive me insane, and I'm also a lazy prick. So here you go, enjoy. Well, as I've stated several times before, WrestleMania III was the one that really set the standard. This was the one that was the blueprint for what WrestleManias would eventually become. It had the big venue. I know the actual attendance number has been disputed, but that crowd was just massive. It was the first time WrestleMania had a crowd of that size. The matches were bigger. The storylines heading into it were bigger. The feuds were more personal. It was just an all-around gigantic show. And unlike anything that the WWF had ever attempted before, even with the first 2 WrestleManias. As I've said before, you know, this was, to me, the starting point to where WrestleMania really started to become that special, larger-than-life event, rather than just being a regular card with celebrities mixed in. This one was really, really special and really big and had great atmosphere. And was just an entertaining show all around. And it's really known for 2 matches. And to me, both of these matches have become legendary. Ricky Steamboat versus Randy Savage for the Intercontinental title, which was one of the best matches of all time. And a match that forever changed the way matches are worked and put together. I mean, you can still see that match's fingerprints today on modern-day wrestling matches. I mean, yeah, the moves have been surpassed. Current modern workers were able to take that and do more things with it, but you can't beat the blueprint. I mean, this really was the ultimate showcase for high-speed, fast-paced, breakneck kind of matches. I mean, this match was the Cruiserweight division and the X division and you know, guys like Shawn Michaels and stuff like that before any of them were even in existence on a mainstream level. This match was so influential, it's just great. And it had a great storyline and feud heading into it. It was one of the best injury angles I've ever seen, with Savage using the ring bell to bust up Ricky Steamboat and keeping him out of action. It's like, oh, actually sell an injury, a kayfabe injury. What a novel concept. But yeah, this was just fantastic and great. And obviously the other one is the main event, Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant, the one that drew that crowd. It was just a wonderful storyline, what they were able to do. The friends turn enemies, with Andre's jealousy building and building for, you know, in secret for Hogan's entire title reign. That segment they did on Piper's Pit, which is just perfect for setting this match up, where Andre rips the cross and the shirt off of Hogan and challenges him to a match at WrestleMania. And they believably were able to sell it as Andre being unbeatable, and that's what really made it work. If they tried to do something like this with Big Show, it wouldn't work, because he loses all the time, and nobody views him as this unstoppable force. Well, Andre was, and yeah, he wasn't completely undefeated for 15 years, but they were able to convince people that, you know, they weren't bullshitting. It was great. They were able to actually set up the perfect obstacle for Hulk Hogan. And in the end, it created a very dramatic, very exciting situation. Now, granted, I know both workers are limited, and Andre basically had one foot in the grave by this point, but it didn't matter. The build-up was so good that everything they did mattered. The little that they could do, every little bit of it mattered, and I still get goosebumps when I watch that match to this day. And I watch it and I just think it's like, whoa, Andre's got him. It just looked like Hogan was screwed. And it was really the perfect match for Hogan to have at that point, to really put him over the top as the top guy in wrestling. And like I said, it was the blueprint. As much as Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat was a blueprint for affecting how matches are worked, this one was a blueprint on how to book, present, write for, and just showcase a strong main event. And really, it's the blueprint for the WrestleMania main event and how to make a main event feel larger than life and can't miss. And those are the major positives of WrestleMania III. There's a couple of other good stuff there. Piper's retirement match, which turned out to not be a retirement, but it was still entertaining. Hercules versus Billy Jack Haynes in a battle of the full Nelsons. I love feuds like that, where it's like, no, I can do a finisher better than you. Okay. It's basic, but it works. I thought the midget match was funny. I mean, I got to watch King Kong Bundy squash a midget. I mean, that's pretty funny. Bundy pounded Little Beaver. Bad pun number 850 for me, but the six-man tag, Danny Davis and the Hart Foundation versus British Bulldogs and Tito Santana, that was a really good match. Jake and Honky Tonk had that awesome bit with Alice Cooper. The opening tag match, it was the Can-Am Connection versus Orton, Bob Orton, that is, and Don Morocco. That match was good. So there's a lot of like good, fun stuff on there with two legendary matches thrown in there in front of a great crowd with a great atmosphere. That, to me, this one really set the bar for WrestleMania and really established a standard of enormity that WrestleManias in the future would ultimately have and make into a regular thing. Seven is a bit of an underrated one, and I've always really had a thing for this one. It was actually my favorite WrestleMania when I was a kid. I just thought, and unfortunately it's kind of known for, they tried to have it set in this huge venue, I don't remember where it was, where they were going to try and beat the WrestleMania III record and sell 100,000 seats. And obviously, you know, I think low ticket sales, well, I don't think I know, that's what it was. It was low ticket sales that led to that happening, and they had to switch to the LA Sports Arena. And, of course, they used the excuse of a bomb scare, given the Sergeant Slaughter character. But I'm willing to bet it was more low ticket sales, because, you know, the boom period of the rock and wrestling era seemed to have faded by that point. But everything, other than that, I really liked a lot of the feuds they had going into this. I thought some of the matches were really good. And some of it has become more historically significant over time. This WrestleMania was the first one that Shawn Michaels had a winning match. Him and with Marty Jannetty, they were the Rockers. They opened up the show against Haku and the Barbarian, and they won. It's actually one of my favorite Mania openers. I probably put it second only to Bret and Owen at 10. Just really fast-paced, awesome tag match. It was the last pay-per-view with the Hart Foundation teamed up as a team. Their match was very good as well, them versus the Nasty Boys. That was a really hot tag match where they dropped the titles to the Nasty Boys. The Undertaker made his WrestleMania debut, and at the time it was just a squash match. He just went out there, squashed Jimmy Snuka, and got his character over. Now that match seems a lot more important because it was the first match in the streak. It's a bit of an event match now. In hindsight, it means a lot more. So it was the starting of something historic, even if it was just a squash match. LOD made their WrestleMania debut. They just destroyed Power and Glory in under a minute, but it was like, wow, LOD showed up at WrestleMania and had a match, and they did what they do best, kill people. That's awesome. I really like the blindfold match. I know a lot of people don't, but I thought Jake Roberts and Rick Martel put something pretty good together. Jake would work the crowd, Martel would provide the comedy, and it just worked out from there. And I thought it was a really entertaining match, and the crowd was really into it, so it's not like they sat on their hands or anything, but that match worked a lot better than it had any right to, considering they barely touched each other. And they probably couldn't get away with doing a match like that today, because I've seen blindfold matches bomb horribly, but I really like that one, so what can you say? I thought Big Boss Man and Mr. Perfect had a pretty good match for the Intercontinental title. That's another kind of a hidden gem. Really, Hennig was in the peak of his career, and Bossman was pretty good. He was a big guy that could really move around and be really quick and fast. That wasn't the case later on in his career. I mean, you watch him in the Attitude Era, and he sucks. But although he's awesome at getting heat, he was like one of the best heels they had. But here is this big, large baby face that could really move around the ring. He was pretty good. And we got a special appearance from Andre as well. That was kind of awesome. I've already put over the Ultimate Warrior Randy Savage match. I think that's probably the match that makes this WrestleMania one of my favorites. Because this match is one of my favorites. It's emotionally charged. It's awesome. I love Liz and Randy reuniting after the match. That career-ending match to me is one of WrestleMania's all-time greatest. I just love it. It's an awesome, dramatic, and just very, very exciting match. I can't say enough good things about it. I love it. I'm trying to think some other things. One match that really surprised me at how good it was: Warlord and the British Bulldog. They had a match. It was supposed to be a throwaway match built around, can British Bulldog break the full Nelson of the Warlord? And let me start off by saying something. Warlord sucked. I mean, you want a guy cut from the same cloth as, like, Rob Terry or Ezekiel Jackson, where he's just a body. That was the Warlord. He was just a jacked-up guy with muscles, and that's all he was. He was just a musclehead. Somehow him and Bulldog went out there and had a really good match. I don't know how that happened, but they had a really good power versus athleticism type of match where Bulldog broke the full Nelson and power slammed him for the win. And, for an undercard match, I was like, wow, that was actually pretty good. Way better than any Warlord match has any business being, anyway. And then there was Virgil and Ted DiBiase, which was one of my favorite storylines from 1991. I loved it. It was great. Great heat on DiBiase. It was the perfect platform for DiBiase to be an asshole to do this feud, and he was a perfect asshole in the match they had here. Again, I think the SummerSlam match they had later in the year was much better, but this one did a great job of establishing more heat on DiBiase and just giving him the perfect platform to be an asshole. Then you had the main event of Hogan and Slaughter, which was kind of controversial given that we were, in the Gulf War. Actually, I think the initial Desert Storm had been concluded by this point. I don't remember. But, some people thought it was in poor taste to have Sergeant Slaughter be an Iraqi sympathizer. I kind of just viewed it as, good guy versus bad guy. I didn't really think too much into it, especially as a kid. I just rooted for Hogan, and that was it. The match itself, I think, is good. I think it's a good, solid main event that gave the crowd what they wanted, and it was satisfying when Hogan got the belt back and beat the bad guy. I don't think it's a classic by any means, but it was good. I enjoyed it. And Hogan did some things in there that were pretty cool. Like, he actually went to the top rope, which Hogan never does. And he bladed, which, was rare for WrestleMania back in those days and is non-existent nowadays. So there was some good stuff in there. I did enjoy that match. And if there's anything else I'm missing, I think I got all the good stuff. But, this WrestleMania to me is just kind of loaded with all kinds of history and great matches, big feuds, and all kinds of stuff. And to me, it was always one of the more exciting WrestleManias. It's one of my favorites, without a doubt. Two years ago, I did a video explaining how awesome the main event of this show was and how wonderfully booked it was and how great, they handled WrestleMania 14 as a whole, centered around Mike Tyson, Steve Austin, and Shawn Michaels, and that whole situation, that whole main event. It's one of the biggest WrestleMania main events of all time, probably second only to Hogan and Andre. It's just an outstanding piece of writing and booking and planning on WWE's part. And the match itself delivered, and it was the beginning of the Austin era, which is one of the biggest moments in wrestling history. It was very satisfying all around. How was the rest of the show? I thought it was awesome, or else it wouldn't be on this list, would it? I thought Undertaker and Kane had a match that stole the show. I really enjoyed that match. It's the best big man match in WrestleMania history, for my money. The dumpster match for the tag titles was really good. The Intercontinental title match between Rock and Shamrock was kind of a squash match where Shamrock pretty much just destroyed Rock, but they did a fantastic job handling the characters. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but basically every character involved in the situation came out stronger after that match was over. And the way Rock managed to weasel away with the Intercontinental title was pretty brilliant. It was really great. Again, great writing all around. The mixed tag match was a lot of fun because I just rewatched this WrestleMania not too long ago. I forgot how over Sable was back then. And the stuff that she did with Luna in that mixed tag match was pretty damn awesome to see. And really a testament to how good Luna Vachon was. There's a light heavyweight title match that's just a filler, but it's just an excuse for guys to do flippy flops for 5 minutes. So, okay, that was fine. The Tag Team Battle Royal was cool because LOD made their return. There was a European title match between Owen Hart and Triple H that was really, really good. And the best thing I can say about this WrestleMania is that every feud had months and months of build-up put into it. Owen and Triple H had been... You can trace that one all the way back to Survivor Series after the Montreal Screwjob. Austin Michaels, you can trace that one all the way back to the previous year. I did an entire video about it. Undertaker and Kane, that goes all the way back to about midway through 97. All sorts of stuff like that. I think the dumpster match has been built up for 2 months. They did a wonderful job. Shamrock and Rock, that one goes all the way back to the previous year, and their previous match at the Royal Rumble as well. There's just so much. They put a lot into planning these matches, making these matches feel special, making the storylines behind these matches actually work. And in the end, it was a very exciting, very well put together, and just a damn near flawless show. It's a really wonderfully well done show, and also features Pete Rose getting tombstone for the first time, which was pretty awesome. So this show is just great. Great matches, great moments, great storylines. It's huge, it's big. To me, in a lot of ways, it's the definitive WrestleMania of the Attitude Era. WrestleMania 17, we're still in the Attitude Era at this point, and this one gets a lot of praise for being one of the best, and for the most part, it deserves it. It's one of the biggest WrestleManias. The venue looks awesome. That is one of the best-looking Mania venues ever, and it's a genuinely exciting show from start to finish. Jericho and Regal, Guerrero and Test, which features one of the funniest botches I've ever seen in a match. You don't know what I'm talking about? Go check it out. Hardcore title three-way was good. A lot of really good solid stuff, a lot of big matches. I thought Vince and Shane was really good. Angle and Benoit, even though I said it was overrated as all hell, is still good. TLC, even though I said it's overrated, is still pretty good. Undertaker and Triple H is great. The Gimmick Battle Royal was so much fun. Just those entrances. And at WrestleMania 25, when they did the Miss WrestleMania Battle Royal, compare that one to the Gimmick Battle Royal, and you'll see where they fucked it up. Because the Diva Battle Royal at 25 should have worked too, but they made one major flaw. But to see all those characters come out in individual entrances, I marked out big time for Bobby Heenan and Mean Gene Okerlund doing commentary for the match. I remember sitting at home live when the pay-per-view was going on. I jumped out of my chair. I was so happy. But just a lot of really great stuff and big moments on this WrestleMania. And I feel like Rock and Austin is a fantastic main event. It's the best match that those two ever had together, and it's one of my personal favorite WrestleMania main events, bar none. Now, a lot of people praise this WrestleMania to the point that they say it's unquestionably the greatest Mania of all time. Don't know if I would go that far. I do have some problems with it, like the Austin heel turn, and like I said, a couple of matches are overrated. But as a whole, it is a very exciting show. It's awesome. It's one of the best WrestleManias, without a doubt. It's fantastic. I love it. And the final of my best of WrestleManias is WrestleMania 19, which I think is a damn good one. There were so many things about this show that I just loved. It felt big. The venue looked awesome. That might be the best looking WrestleMania. Safeco Field, and the set and everything just looked amazing. The only other one I can think of that looked as good was probably 26. But aesthetically, it looked amazing. The whole show, the presentation and everything was fantastic. And while there was some horrid stuff on there, like Limp Bizkit's performances and the Miller Lite Catfight girls being the major celebrity guests, which that is the bottom of the barrel as far as celebrity guest goes. I mean, if I were going to judge WrestleManias based solely on which celebrities they got, this one would probably be the worst, because I'm thinking, really, that's a worthwhile attraction? The Miller Lite Catfight girls? Who are they? Does anybody know their names? Does anybody remember them? You know, but aside from that, the show was very good. It was a very strong wrestling show because they had a ton of main event caliber matches. On the undercard, they had some good stuff too. Like, I think the women's match was Trish Stratus, Victoria, and Jazz is probably the best women's match in Mania history, which isn't saying much. I mean, you've really only got 3 options. The title match at 1 was Cyndi Lauper and Wendy Richter's corner. Mickie James and Trish at 22, and this one. Those are really your only options for good, straight-up women's matches at WrestleMania. There are a couple mixed tags, too, but there aren't many good women's matches at WrestleMania, so for 19 to have a good one, good for them. The Cruiserweight title match was good, the 3-way tag match was good, just a lot of great, solid wrestling action throughout. And then when you get into the main events, it's outstanding. Actually, the 2 weakest main events are the 2 title matches, I have to say. But Triple H and Booker T, it's a good match. It's a solid World Heavyweight title match, and it did main event, which is good. And I know I went on a giant rant in another video about how Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar is massively overrated. And I stand by those comments, but it's still a good match. It didn't hurt the show at all. Well, not majorly hurt the show. I guess the botch kind of knocks it down a peg or two, but overall, it's still a very good show, and the other main events are fantastic. Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho was a match that I had a picture in my head of what that match would be like, and this match met those expectations, and it was wonderful. That was a beautiful match. I loved it. It's one of Jericho's best performances, I think. He did everything I wanted him to do in that match. It was great. Just trying to out Shawn Michaels was just a perfect way to book that match. Rock and Austin 3, the final curtain for Steve Austin, that was wonderful. That was great to see those two tangle up one more time, have another great match, and then you get Austin's big farewell. Although we didn't know it was his farewell at the time, but we found it out the next night on Raw that was going to be his last match. It was a very appropriate send-off for Austin. And I even thought Hogan McMahon was great. I think that was an outstanding, wild, and crazy street fight that, just had a bunch of surprises and, crazy moments and great visuals and stuff. I thought that match was extremely good. And WrestleMania 19 was just a really, really well-done wrestling show with big main events and a larger-than-life atmosphere, great venue. To me, it was the last WrestleMania that truly, fully knocked my socks off. It was fantastic. As for a couple of other ones that didn't quite make the cut, I'm trying to think of the WrestleManias that people seem to like. I always liked WrestleMania 5. I think that one's a great time capsule, kind of one to really reminisce and look back on the 80s. I really liked the main event and the whole situation surrounding Hogan and Savage. I thought that was cool. And there's a lot of fun stuff on the undercard, too. I don't think it's a fully complete show like the 5 I just listed, but it is a lot of fun. 8 is another one that people seem to like, and yeah, it has 2 of my all-time favorite WrestleMania matches, for sure. But the show is very uneven. It wasn't structured as well as it could have been. It's still enjoyable, especially with Warrior coming back at the end and everything. But it wasn't a solidly put together show. At least not. It wasn't structured well, even though it did have 2 of my all-time favorite matches. 10 is one that I'm heavily biased towards because it actually fell on my 9th birthday. March 20th, 1994. I turned 9 years old and got to see WrestleMania. And quite honestly, I got to see 2 of the greatest matches in wrestling history, 2 of my all-time favorites anyway, in the ladder match and Bret and Owen. And I got to see my favorite wrestler at the time, Bret Hart, win the title. So it was a pretty good day for me. I really liked it and enjoyed it for those reasons. As a complete show, though, there's a lot of dead weight on there, and I can admit that. But, it had its... When it was good, it was really, really good. But it wasn't a fully complete WrestleMania. 12 is a good one. Granted, instead of making the same mistakes that they made with 11 and 13, they kind of realized that they didn't have that deep of a roster, so they were just like, hey, Bret and Shawn, do you think you can go out there and wrestle for an hour, and that would be, like half the show? That's kind of what they did. And, you know, it's not quite a one-match show. I do think the Iron Man match is very good, but there's some stuff on the undercard that's good as well. It doesn't quite have the larger-than-life atmosphere that a lot of the best WrestleManias do, but during the down period, especially that 11 to 13 stretch, it was about as good a WrestleMania as you were going to get, and, you know, Brett and Shawn deserve a lot of credit for that. Some other ones. A lot of people seem to like 20. And yeah, I mean, it was a big one because it was the 20th WrestleMania where it all begins again, and a lot of it was really well hyped. And there's some good stuff on there. I think the main event is one of the best. I liked Eddie and Angle, even though I think, you know, the fans kind of, you know, overhype how good it is, as I said before. Jericho and Christian was good. The Evolution versus Rock and Sock match was good. Undertaker's entrance was cool. But there's kind of a lot of dead weight and some really bad stuff, too. You know, from the Divas matches to... You know, I don't know whose brilliant idea it was to have 2 4-way tags and why did they have 2 tag divisions? That's just stupid. Then you had Lesnar and Goldberg, which was a gigantic failure on a, you know, of all the big WrestleMania matches. I mean, that one was just a failure. The Cruiserweight Open was really disappointing and kind of a mess. So there's a lot of pitfalls in that one, but the goods are good enough to kind of balance it out and make it a good WrestleMania, even though we're not supposed to remember it, thanks to the actions of Mr. Benoit. 21 is one that I truthfully think is on the edge of being one of the best WrestleManias of all time. It's so close. It's almost there, from Money in the Bank to Orton and Undertaker to Shawn Michaels and Angle, which was fantastic. It's on the cusp of being one of the greatest WrestleManias ever. And then it failed with the main events. Both world title matches were just not what they needed to be and not as good as... Or not booked the way that they should have been to deliver as well as possible. I don't know why they felt the need for Batista to sell for 20 minutes, but he's not good at selling. And that was kind of the downfall of that match. And Cena and JBL is probably the most anticlimactic match in the history of WrestleMania. That was just a failure, and it's just a shame because it was so close to being one of the best, but God, it tripped at the finish line. 22 is better than it had any right to be because the build-up to that show was awful. The only storyline I liked, truthfully, was Trish Stratus versus Mickie James. I thought that was an outstanding storyline, and it almost felt like it was written by different people. I'm almost convinced that Mickie and Trish wrote that storyline themselves. Everything else was just, you know, storyline-wise, either wasn't what they needed to do, or wasn't that good, or kind of a cluttered mess, or whatever. But the effort of the wrestlers, they went out there and did their best to try and put on the best show possible, and it was solid. It was good overall. And then that main event happened, and it was like, fuck that show. It's like the main event was awful. I hated it, as I've already stated before. 23, I think I've talked about this before. It's got good big matches, but again, it's got a lot of dead weight on the undercard side of things, so it's not a fully complete WrestleMania, unfortunately. 24 is one that people really liked, and I think it's a really good one. I do really like that one. There's not a whole lot of things wrong with it. I do think overall it's good, solid, and good throughout. But except for Flair and Michaels, I think it's only good. I think, you know, Edge and Undertaker, not one of my favorites. I think it's really good. I think it's a really, really solid main event. Not one of my favorites. I thought they had much better matches down the road, especially their Hell in a Cell at SummerSlam. The three-way was good. Finlay and JBL was good. Batista and Umaga was alright. Money in the Bank was really good. And it's full of that. It's just a lot of really good with one really emotional and great match. And I think it's solidly entertaining throughout. I do think it's probably the best WrestleMania of the 20s. But it's not quite one of my favorites. I don't think of it as highly... If 21 had really delivered on the main event side of things, I wouldn't think of it as being better than 21, for example. And then other than that, 26, I wasn't that impressed with outside of the main event. Undertaker and Shawn was great, and that was awesome. Everything else was kind of hit and miss, kind of okay. Nothing truly awful except for Brett and Vince and the Divas match, but... It was just kind of, you know, it was alright. Kind of a cruise control kind of show. Nothing special. Edge and Jericho was disappointing. It was just okay. It was okay, and then you got the great main event, so that's cool. And actually, I skipped 6, and that's another one that people seem to look back on as one of the bigger ones. And yeah, for the venue and for being the first international WrestleMania, yeah. It's kind of a one-match show, though. I do think it's more all about Hogan and Warrior. Not to say that there's not some other stuff on there. Like Jake and DiBiase I thought was really good. I liked the tag title match. I liked the mixed tag match. But it's just, it's kind of all about the main event in that case, and not a whole lot of substance on the undercard. And 28 people seem to really like. And again, it's kind of a two-match show. As I've stated before, I thought Jericho and Punk was really disappointing. I loved Hell in a Cell. I thought that was great. And Rock and Cena was a good main event. It was good. It was not this all-time classic that people seem to think, that WWE seems to think it is. But overall, it was really just all about those two matches. Everything else was just dead weight. And yeah, that's it as far as WrestleManias go. So yeah, there's been a lot of good WrestleManias, a lot of great ones, but those five, man, those to me, that's the class of WrestleMania. Those are the high-caliber shows that really, to me, when I think of the excellence of WrestleMania, those are the absolute best, in my mind.